Hey everybody, it's Dr. Nick here with another exciting episode of the Hospitality Spirit podcast. Today, I'm joined by David Rev Ciancio. Rev is a former New York City bar owner and knows exactly how hard it is to operate and brand a hospitality business. He's now a marketing consultant, customer and technology evangelist at Branded Strategic Hospitality with more than 20 years of experience in B2B digital marketing and business development, specializing in hospitality marketing, content, local, SEO, reputation management, and influencer marketing. He helps technology companies, brands, and restaurants to acquire and retain customers. Rev is known as an expert burger taster, pens hospitality and marketing tips on his Instagram, and he believes pizza is a religion. Rev, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Nick. I'm grateful to be here today.
So there's so many directions I want to start with. We could actually spend this whole time talking about burgers and pizza, which might actually be a fascinating podcast because they're two of my favorite things.
Likewise.
But in the spirit of hospitality, we always like to start with the present, and we will work our way back and talk about a little things. I promise you we'll get to talk about burgers and pizza. But where I really kind of want to start, and following in tradition on the hospitality spirit, we like to start with the current. And then we'll work our way back and we'll deviate. And we'll talk a little bit about burgers and pizza, but let's start with the current that, we're coming out of the global pandemic. What are you doing today to have an impact, a positive impact on the hospitality industry, specifically restaurants?
Sure. So that's a great question. And don't worry with me, I will always work burger and pizza into the conversation.
Excellent.
Ask my wife. It's probably why we're both on a diet. Anyway, you made me realize that in reading over sort of my bio there that I need to update it. It says that I'm a former New York City bar owner, and that will never not be the truth. In a couple of weeks here, we're recording this in early November. I'm opening a restaurant, and awesome. I did say I would never do that again. And I need to be careful about saying never, because I also said I would never live in New York City. I would never get married and never have children. And all of those things have happened.
Never say never.
Never, unless maybe I need to start saying that I will never win the lottery, because
exactly.
maybe that works. But I am opening another restaurant. So that is currently kind of what's happening.
Excellent. Well, we will do a separate podcast episode. I promise to bring you back and we'll talk about the opening of a restaurant, because I think we could do a whole episode just on that. But what are you doing now outside of opening up the new restaurant?
Sure. God bless. So let me tell you a little bit of a story. So, when I used to own that bar in the East Village in New York City, we sold it at a loss in 2016. And in that moment, like when we announced that, we're not going to have the bar anymore, I started getting phone call after phone call from other, operators and owners of restaurants and bars saying, oh my God, you guys had such a huge emailing list and you had so many followers on social media and you had all these 5-star reviews. Like, how did you lose the business? I realized two things in that moment. A, I was a terrible operator, number one. And number two, I had a skill set that other operators didn't have, which was B2B marketing for hospitality businesses. And I kind of dedicated myself in that moment to like helping restaurants with their marketing. And, since then I've been on a journey where I've worked for a number of companies, mostly tech companies that help restaurants with their marketing. And where that relates to answering your question is, at the beginning of 2020, I worked for a company called Single Platform. Mm-hmm. We're a technology company that helped restaurants to manage their menus all over the internet. So Google, Bing, Yahoo, Yelp, Foursquare, Facebook, TripAdvisor, et cetera. And they had been bought by TripAdvisor. And we were in the middle of assimilating the two companies. Mm-hmm. On February 26th, I was the chief marketing officer for Single Platform, which was a $44 million in annual recurring revenue software platform. And on February 27th, I walked in and my boss let me go. And the reason he let me go was not performance-based. Basically, heading into a global pandemic, TripAdvisor was losing millions of dollars a day. Nobody was going to China or Italy or Europe, and coronavirus had hit the shores of America. And so TripAdvisor was bleeding money. And so my boss got a phone call and said, hey, you got to let go of 60% of senior management tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So I walked into my office ready for another day of work, and my boss let me and a whole bunch of other people go. Wow. And I did what anybody would have done in that moment. I panicked. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do? I got a mortgage and healthcare and groceries and a family and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you know what? I got a severance package. Consult.
Sure.
Just do some consulting business. I think we all probably thought in that moment that if we literally wash our hands for like 4 to 6 weeks, it'll go away and, we'll return to normal. And so I started a consulting business, and, already long story kind of shortened, that consulting business sort of more than replaced my corporate salary in about 6 to 8 months. Wow. And I will not be going back to a quote unquote job. This consulting business is going very well, and I love it, and I'm super happy. And so to answer your question more directly, what do I do now? I help restaurants with their acquisition and retention marketing. So,
Gotcha.
I'm not necessarily helping them make a logo or build a website, but I'm helping them to get more guests, to get their guests to make more repeat visits, and to increase their average order. And so I'm doing that mostly with like digital marketing strategies and tactics. So that's kind of what I do.
Do you, if we go back, it's kind of like, as you're explaining that, it's kind of a chicken and the egg scenario for me in my head. Did you fall in love with the restaurant industry first, or did you kind of fall in love with the marketing, helping kind of the larger strategic kind of acquisitions and things like that and customer retention, and then you just applied that into the restaurant industry?
The answer is yes. I grew up loving restaurants, mm-hmm. right? In my family, like somebody would get a good grade, or, my mom would get a promotion at work, or my dad would be celebrating an anniversary with something. Like we went out to eat. Mm-hmm. Right? In my family, going out to eat was a celebration, and it didn't always have to be like something major. It didn't have to be a birthday. You know what I mean? Like my mom and dad just loved going to restaurants. And so I kind of grew up in the culture of like eating out as a treat, right? And so, I had the standard, like I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken, I worked at McDonald's, I bussed tables at a restaurant. Like I've just always been around it. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of always loved the culture of a restaurant, and I love the plight of the independent operator. Mm-hmm. And like, to me, it's like, it's celebratory to eat out. So I've kind of always loved restaurants. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't surprise me that I gravitated towards it. But, this restaurant part of my career is actually the second half of my career. Mm-hmm. When I came out of college, I was in love with the music business.
Ah, okay.
And for 11 years, I was in the music business and owned my own agency in the music business, helping, basically bands to sell records. So it was, again, B2C, consumerism.
And it's interesting because you're not the first guest to make a guest on the podcast to make that same transition. I mean, I think back to guests that we've had on, like Vince Anter. Like he moved to LA and wanted to be a rock star, and then he just kind of fell in love with the restaurant side of it, specifically wine. So it's not that uncommon to make that transition. They're somehow connected.
Yeah. And, I've thought about that a lot, obviously, because I've spent a lot of time in both arenas. But I look at it this way, like I'm not an artist. I'm not the guitarist, and I'm not the chef. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm the person that helps the guitarist or helps the chef to actualize their dreams. Mm-hmm. And here's the way I see it. When a band is on stage and they play the song, and like there's that instant gratification of the crowd cheering, right? That tickles the same part of your brain as like, I put the hamburger on a plate in front of you at the table and you ate it and you tell me it was amazing, mm-hmm. right? There's like an instant gratification. And so I think a chef and a musician have like a similar mindset and similar things that motivate them. Mm-hmm. So to me, like there's an absolute correlation between the two. And I've actually done a little bit of research about this, and this is true. The same part of your brain that responds to like nudity or pornography or like sexual excitement is the exact same part of your brain that feels the way about a pizza. Like it's the same exact part of your brain. So like, it makes sense to me. You know what I mean?
So if somebody comes to you, and I guess I'm curious nothing is traditional. I mean, everything is different in the hospitality industry. I mean, every day is different. Every business is different, but I'm curious, do the services that you offer as a consultant, are those more for already well-established businesses that are maybe looking to pivot, maybe looking to ride the wave of a current trend that's going on? Or are you helping businesses that are just starting up that want to make sure that they start on the right foot and they don't fall victim to, closing within the first 6 months like so many restaurants do?
Again, the answer to your questions are yes. So, look, if I'm being really, really honest, restaurant marketing is kind of the same regardless of your business model or your location. It's the same 5 to 7 moves apply everywhere. You just have to apply your creativity and your brand, right? So, is the tactic that I would deploy for a store opening different than a store that's been open for 3 years? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the plan and the strategy would be different. However, the channels are the same. I would be using search. I would be using Facebook and Instagram ads. I would be using social media, email, SMS, right? So like the channels would be the same regardless of the service model or location, but the strategy for what we're trying to achieve would be different. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Do you traditionally find that, I'm assuming if you go to somebody and say, let me help you get more loyal customers and more repeat business, they're going to say, to use your term, yes, yes to both. But not every restaurant and food and beverage operation, be it a fine dining, quick casual, a lounge, bar, participates in that. And sometimes it's an issue of manpower, it's an issue of financial resources, it's an issue of both, it's an issue of just a lack of knowledge about the best way to proceed. What are you seeing as the biggest roadblock to stop people from doing this already that you help them tear down?
Time and know-how, right? And so, why I like to joke all the time, why do they call them restaurant operators? Because they're not marketers, right? Like they're good at operations. They're good at things that like keep the business running. And so marketing is a secondary or even tertiary thought. And that doesn't mean that, restaurant operators don't think marketing is important, right? They're just like not good at it, or it's not in their skill set. And so unless they have somebody to do it for them, it ends up taking a back seat because it feels insurmountable. Like, if I walk out of my house and, I break, like, I'm having trouble coming up with a great example. But let's say like I lean on my railing and I break one of the poles on it, but it's fine. Like, it's okay. I don't know how to fix a railing. I'm going to continue to walk by it until like I have to take care of it. Sure. If I was a handyman by nature, though, that night I would get out my table saw, and I have no idea what I'm talking about here, and I would fix it. You know what I'm saying? But because it's not in my skill set, I'm going to brush it off and brush it off and brush it off until I have to do something about it, right? And so for a restaurant operator, it's the same thing. It's like, well, I don't know what to do. I know it's important, but I don't know how to do it. I'm going to go do something else I know how to do instead, right? And that will continue to take a back seat. But the right way to do this, and I'll tell you, my life motto is be awesome at 2 things and outsource everything else. If you're a restaurant operator and marketing is important and you don't have the time in your day to learn it, or you don't want to learn it, but you need it, hire somebody. Whether that's an internal or an external resource, like pay somebody else to do it for you.
It's interesting because I've always been, it's very different in the restaurant side of things compared, we compare different segments of hospitality a lot on the podcast, and you don't necessarily see some of these same challenges, let's say in the hotel sector. You have companies that are owned by franchise companies, management companies. You have big multinational companies that own these hotels. They've got the marketing machine in place. They've got the human resources in place. They've got the accounting functions in place. It's standardized wherever you go. But in the restaurant side, you have so many independent operators, individual restaurants, maybe 2 or 3 restaurants that aren't associated with these larger chains and larger companies. So while these individual operators might be so knowledgeable on how to design a menu and so knowledgeable on how to craft a beautiful wine list or a cocktail menu, or what kind of cuisine is seasonal given the geographic location where you are, when it comes to some of these other functions like running a business, whether it's marketing or whether it's really strong, valid, reliable human resources strategies for training, development, compensation, recruiting, performance evaluation, maybe that's something that they definitely should outsource. And it's not to say that the operators aren't amazing at what they do. To your point, be awesome at a couple things, but then leverage the external help for the others.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, does a restaurant operator know how to wash dishes? Yes.
Absolutely.
But they're not going to do it because they have more important things to do. So they hire a dishwasher. Okay. Yeah. Same with marketing. You have more important things to do than learn how to be a marketer. Cool. Hire the right marketer. Again, whether it's somebody that's an employee or an agency, like, get help. I mean,
what's the role? I'm curious. we've talked about social media on the podcast before, but since I've got you on and you're incredibly knowledgeable in this, I'm curious what the role of, I'll use it in quotes and correct me if I'm using the terminology wrong. What is the role of an influencer in the restaurant industry? Is it something that's needed? Is it seen as causes a headache and it's just kind of the cost of doing business? I mean, what role does an influencer play in a food and beverage operation?
It's a great question. I'm going to answer it from two paths.
Okay.
So the first path is this. An influencer you have to understand where influencer marketing happens in the customer journey, right? Mm-hmm. So for somebody to find out about a restaurant, there's the awareness stage, right? Mm-hmm. How did I learn about this restaurant? Then there's the acquisition stage. What step did I take to then either dine with you or make a purchase? Okay. The third part of the stage is the experience. It's actually dining or, ordering delivery. And the fourth part of the customer journey for a restaurant is then what happens after that gets me to purchase again. Mm-hmm. Okay. Influencer marketing lives at the awareness stage. To use technology speak, it's top of funnel. It is a method through which consumers can find out about or be reminded about a restaurant business. Does that make sense?
It does, totally.
It's a top of funnel move. It happens before somebody is on your Instagram account. It happens before somebody gets to your website. It happens before they place an order, right? So that's why it's called top of funnel. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's answer one. Number two, right? Here's another thing to realize, okay? And this is going to go to a 30,000 foot view. Why does Taco Bell place an ad on Sunday Football, buy a billboard, send a menu to your front door, buy ads on Facebook, do influencer marketing, send email, and update their Instagram? Why are they using 8 channels or maybe more to communicate to people about chalupas? Because Taco Bell knows something that you're about to know. Mm. It takes about 7 impressions to get a consumer to consider or make a purchase. Okay. Right. And so Taco Bell knows that if they have 8 channels of which they can market a chalupa to you, the high likelihood that if they've hit you in 6 to 8 of those channels of you getting a chalupa is pretty high. Now, here's the other thing. If Taco Bell just did billboard, and didn't do the other channels, mm-hmm. it takes actually more impressions to get you to buy the chalupa, because what they are trying to do is surround you with messages about chalupa so that subconsciously you're like, I need a chalupa. Okay. All right. And so a restaurant needs to think about how many channels can I get to my consumer mm-hmm. to get them to come dine with me. Right. And the more channels you have, the faster, the more easy it is to make that move.
How is the little guy, and I use that in the small independent owner operated restaurant, going to hit 7 impressions? Well, it's a huge financial investment, right?
I'm going to answer that question after I finish the influencer question.
Okay, got it.
So influencer marketing to me is a channel.
Okay.
Okay. And it's a channel for awareness. So, if you're talking about, okay, now to segue into your new question is, how does an independent operator, or a local business do this? Well, you can update Instagram. That doesn't take a lot of effort, mm-hmm. right? You could send out a weekly newsletter. That doesn't take a lot of effort. You can buy Facebook and Instagram ads, and if you want to make it easier, you could use a tool like Targetable. That doesn't take a lot of effort. You can have some influencer marketing. You can update your listing on Google for search. And so now you've already got 6 channels, mm-hmm. and it didn't take a ton of work. You see what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
And so you have to look at, like, what are all the possible channels that I have available to me? What is the time it takes to manage them? And can I do that? Right? So if I'm an independent operator, I would update Instagram or Facebook or both. That's a channel. Mm-hmm. I would send out a weekly newsletter, right? That's 2 channels. I could use influencer marketing from time to time. That's 3 channels. I could have a text messaging program. That's 4 channels. I could do some Facebook and Instagram advertising. If you have the right tools, that's not hard. That's 5 channels. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Do you find, have you been able to, if you put your consultant hat on for a moment and if I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to prioritize those different channels, I mean, can you pretty confidently say that one's going to give you a lot more ROI than the other, or are they kind of all somewhat equal? You just got to put the time in.
Yes, I absolutely can say that. So I have my own podcast, and again, thank you for having me on yours,
Absolutely.
where I interview heads of marketing for very large multi-unit restaurant brands,
Mm-hmm.
and I ask them one question, right? How do you successfully market at the local level? They have, dozens, if not hundreds of locations, and how do they take care of the needs of each single store?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I recently interviewed the head of marketing, Julie Wade, for Taziki's Mediterranean Cafe. They have 92 locations.
Mm-hmm.
I figure she knows a thing or two about this, right?
Yeah.
And I said, what is the number one way in which you drive repeat visits? How do you get your guests to come and make another purchase? And honestly, repeat visits are more important than acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of the high cost and difficulty of getting a customer to dine with you the first time. You don't want to lose them once you have them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I said to her, what's the number one way that Taziki's Mediterranean Cafe drives retention for their 92 stores? And she, without hesitation, she didn't have to think. She literally said, email.
Wow.
Okay. So that's a way of me telling you a story that answers your question, which is I think email is the most important, highest value, lowest hanging fruit, number one priority method of communication for getting your guests to make a repeat visit.
Are you seeing these companies, because if they have access to because if they're doing email marketing, and that means they've got a lot of customer data, I mean, are you seeing them do big data analysis here, and or is there still a lot of room to grow when it comes to kind of email and using customer data?
So are you asking if I'm seeing the large brands do a lot of data evaluation, or are you asking?
Well, I'm pretty sure the large brands are doing it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how does the small independent operator really start to analyze this data and start making some strategic decisions and tactical decisions based on that?
I love this question. So I don't make any bones about it. I'm a technology evangelist, right? If I know technology is going to help you, make more money, work faster, work smarter, make things easier, I'm going to recommend it, right? Mm-hmm. There is a tool out there called Bikky, Bikky, and it's bikky.com. Mm-hmm. That basically does all of the CRM or customer data analysis that any of those big companies pay millions of dollars to do for a fraction of the price. And it makes it easy for independent operators to have customized, personalized marketing for their guests.
That's great.
And so nearly 100% of my restaurant clients are using this technology because it makes it so much easier. I'll give you an example, right? When somebody has not dined with your restaurant in, let's say, 60 days, what do we call them? We call them a lapsed guest, right? Because we need them to come back. Well, if you don't have a tool, how do you analyze when somebody's hit 60 days and how do you communicate them? Well, you'd have to go into your POS, you'd have to run a report, you'd have to download a CSV, you'd have to take everybody who's lapsed, you'd have to upload them into MailChimp, you'd have to write them into email, and you'd have to send it out and say, hey, we miss you, here's 10% off your next order, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That sounds like a lot of work. You know why? Because it is. And why don't most restaurant owners do it? Because it's a lot of work. And look, I'm a marketer and I don't want to do that work.
Sure.
Right? Bikky does all of that for you. It does all of that for you. So you create an email one time called a lapsed guest email that basically, as soon as somebody hits that 60-day mark, it pings the system and it automatically sends them an email that says, we miss you.
Wow.
And if they get to 75 days and they still have not made a purchase, it sends them another, and 90 days another. And when they get to 120 days and they haven't made a purchase, then it says, hey, here's $10 off your next order.
Wow.
Bikky automates that entire process. So if we talk about restaurant operators wanting to have a scaled marketing function so they can go back to operating their business, get a tool like Bikky.
That's
what I mean?
I'm assuming, this is technology, and how we use technology from an operations standpoint is evolving so fast. If you and I sat and had this conversation even 2 years ago, I think we would be talking about different things and different platforms. Have we kind of plateaued for the short term, or are you seeing on the horizon even more technology and even more innovative ways that restaurants can use technology to help improve their business?
I don't think we've hit a plateau at all. I think we've kind of hit like the first level of cornucopia. Like there's so much out there, but there is more plentiful things to be had. And if you look out there at what's happening, there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening in the hospitality tech world.
Mm-hmm.
With like Toast getting an IPO and Olo going public and DoorDash going public, you're going to see a lot more mergers and acquisitions. So I think there's going to be more technology and more platforms coming, and all of these systems are going to get better and do more and be tied in deeper to your POS or your labor management solution. So I think there's more coming, and I think there's more better coming.
So when we do our next episode with you after you've opened your restaurant, we can talk about a whole nother suite of things that you see coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean that the one constant in the restaurant business is change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whether it's change in operations or change in efficiency or change in technology, like there will continue to be change.
So as we kind of wrap up here, Rev, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the two things in your bio that jumped out at me. One, you worship at the Church of Pizza, and two, you are a self-proclaimed, probably one of the best job titles. I'm a big job title guy. I like people that have interesting job titles. I've met a guy one time, his job title was Director of Fun. I like Expert Burger Taster. So talk a little bit as we kind of wrap up here, where this passion came from for burgers and pizza. And then I'm going to ask you the inevitable. What's your go-to if you could have one burger for the rest of your life and one type of pizza for the rest of your life? So.
Sure. I want to be clear that I did not self-proclaim myself as an expert burger taster.
Oh, okay.
If you go, and you don't have to edit that out, leave it in.
Okay.
And you can leave that in me saying that too. If you go to Google and search expert burger taster, I will be the first 7 to 11 results based on your browsing history.
Literally doing it now.
And I'll tell you how that happened. A very good friend of mine, his name is George Motes. He's the world's foremost expert on hamburgers. I like to call him the Indiana Jones of hamburgers.
It's literally the first.
There you go. He had a show on the Travel Channel called Burgerland. Uh-huh. And basically he would travel to different parts of America and he would go eat at 2 or 3 restaurants. And he would take a burger Sherpa with him, like somebody who was from that town that would take him to go eat a couple places.
The Burger Whisperer.
Yeah, that Burger Whisperer. Their job was to find one place he'd never been to. Sure. Well, he called those people expert burger tasters or EBTs.
Okay.
Well, George called me and said, dude, I'm going to film a New York episode. And that's where George is from. And he's like, will you be my EBT for New York? And I was like, thanks for giving me the impossible task. What hamburger have you not eaten in your hometown?
Pressure. Oh my God.
And I actually found a place called Corzo that was amazing and we loved it. It was a really fun episode. But anyway, my Chiron on the show was Rev Ciancio, expert burger taster. Okay. And so my friends saw that, started screenshotting it. It started going around and people just started calling me that. And I went with it. So nice. I was not self-proclaimed as a title I have been assigned, but I do live up to it.
So what in your mind makes a really good burger? I know what it is for me, but I'm curious what you think of an excellent burger. You've already mentioned cheese below the meat on top of the bun to protect the integrity of the bun. But what is an ideal burger for you?
So I kind of love all hamburgers, but I'm saying this knowing I'm about to open a hamburger restaurant.
Okay.
So fresh, never frozen ground beef. You want to use the highest quality beef you can.
Yep.
And my favorite style is like an Oklahoma City onion burger or like a New Jersey or Detroit style smash slider.
Okay.
So it's where you take like a 2 to 3, maybe 4 ounce wad of fresh ground beef, you smash it on a flat top. You maybe cook it or steam it into some onions with salt and pepper. You put it on a squishy bun and then give it like cheese, salt, and pepper. Most people like pickles on their burgers. I think they're disgusting. I call them the zombie virus of food. But if you're asking me like, what's the one style of burger I would eat for the rest of my life? That's probably it.
That sounds amazing.
And ideally, that is actually what we're going to serve at my restaurant. So,
all right. Well, Podcast Jamie is in New York, so I think you've already got your first customer lined up here. I think for me, it definitely is a rare patty. I like all my steak black and blue, so it's rare. I like the rareness. And then for me, I'm kind of a simple traditionalist. I like bacon, mushroom, and blue cheese on my burger. I like just the sharpness and the different textures. I'm just a simple man, but again, we could do burgers. We could talk about burgers and burgers around the world all day, but I got to finish with pizza. And I will put this caveat. I am not in the camp of Chicago pizza is deep dish pizza. I am in the camp of Chicago pizza is tavern style pizza. And I will defend that position until the day I die. Chicago is tavern style thin pizza. But talk to me about your love for pizza and how you got to that point.
Cool. I would tell you that Chicago pizza is actually not pizza; it's a casserole. But that's a different podcast.
I think deep dish is for the tourists.
But I'm from Detroit.
Okay.
So I have that standpoint because I believe the Detroit style pizza is a far superior. Because it is also baked in a pan, I take a very extreme point of view on it. Anyway, I kind of love all pizza. Like, I'm just a pizza advocate. And, I think you hear the joke, like, pizza is like sex, even bad pizza is still good pizza. I've been known to eat an Elios or a Celeste, but I just kind of love pizza. And pizza to me is not only delicious and wonderful, but I see pizza as like a uniting of the tribes type of food. Like, it's one of the few styles of food that's like communal in its nature. Like, it's intended to be shared. It's intended to feed multiple people. It's intended to have its celebrations, and you can kind of do lots of things to have pizza and have it still be wonderful and delicious. It's like a universal language of food. You know what I mean?
It kind of is. And I think the only comparable thing that I would say is somewhat universal is, and I'll use two words, pasta and noodles. Depending on where you are in the world, most people will like pasta and noodles. So that's awesome. Rev, this has been a absolutely amazing podcast. You are incredibly knowledgeable, and I'm already got some notes here on my little pad next to me of the things that I want to talk about when we have you on the podcast next. You're getting ready to open up a restaurant in New York. You are incredibly knowledgeable in the area of marketing, social media, how we use technology to improve restaurant businesses. You are the embodiment of what we like to call the hospitality spirit, and I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today.
Wow, incredibly kind. I'm grateful and humbled by your thoughts and remarks, and I thank you for sharing that, and I thank you for inviting me on the show, and I hope everybody listening picked up something that's going to help them out. I really do.
Thanks, Rev.
Thank you.